Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Views presented by Quantum Podcasts. As always, I will be your host, Chris, and this is the show about all things movies and TV. Well, we continue our MCU marathon today with Thor, Love and Thunder, the fourth Thor movie to come out of the MCU. Chris Hemsworth is back as Thor. We also get newcomer Christian Bale as the villain. I had enjoyed this rewatch. It's a movie that I haven't seen too often since it got released back in 2022. Again, this is another one of the new releases that I reviewed on the podcast when this podcast first started. So it was really cool to kind of rewind back to when this podcast was just an audio cast, and now we're on YouTube on a video version. So why not do it here? Also, you can tell my setup is a little bit different on today's episode. Well, this is debuting the new setup in the studio room that I use to make the podcast, record, all that fun stuff. So I figured why not show more of it to add a little bit more fun to the show. So you can tell there is going to be some drastic changes coming to the show. Some great improvements, I think, for the long haul. So enjoy. Also, check out the official website of the podcast, cinematic-reviews.com, where you can set up a profile and review movies like Thor, Love and Thunder, like I'm going to do today. You can also try out the new game that I just uploaded the other day. The fantasy movie set game is up and running now. You invite your friends, and you can draft your very own movie set with director, actors, actresses, writers, composers. It's kind of a lot like fantasy football. So if you're a fan of that, this is going to be the game for you. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I was finally able to get it up off the ground and into the website. So go ahead and check that out. I'll be doing an episode just on that, so we can kind of give you some instructions and walk through it together and have a little fun on the show. So pay attention to that episode to drop at some point on the podcast. Also, check out all the social media pages for the podcast: Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok. The show is everywhere, so just search Cinematic Reviews and you can find the show there. Also, check out... Nope, I think that's it. I think that's it for the announcements and any other reminders. Coming up, we're going to be continuing the Spider-Man marathon in preparation for Brand New Day. And we'll, of course, continue our MCU marathon as well. So with that, let's dive into news and reactions, because we have a pretty full calendar of lists to cover for news and reactions. All right, first on the news part of today's episode, Blue Beetle is returning in the DC universe in Man of Tomorrow. James Gunn announced that Blue Beetle will be returning after, I think, like 4 years since his solo movie came out. So that is very exciting. It's going to be a little weird too, but very exciting. That was a movie that I was a little late to the party to. I really did enjoy it a lot. So this is great news for the DC universe, kind of bring back a fan favorite that everyone seemed to love. Also, in the DC world, the Batman Part 2, unfortunately, has been delayed once again. It'll be coming out in February 18th, 2028, so a few months after its initial October release. Now, this is I think the third time that DC has delayed this movie, and I wouldn't be surprised if it delays again. I think the running joke now is that it's been delayed more times than GTA 6, which is pretty impressive considering the amount of times that they delayed that game. But this is the new time slot, is February 18th, 2028, for the very anticipated sequel to Robert Pattinson's The Batman that came out in 2022. No initial word on which villain will take part. I think Joker is supposed to be back. I think Penguin's supposed to be back. Riddler might make an appearance. But as far as like the main villain in the story, it's still to be said. Is it due to the script problems that they've been having? Who knows? But Matt Reeves did release a little teaser of what Robert Pattinson will look like as Batman in this sequel in his new suit. It looks pretty cool, so go ahead and check that out. I posted it on all the social media pages for the podcast. You can find it on YouTube as well. It looks very exciting. Looks like it's a snowy, wintry setting, so maybe Mr. Freeze will be coming to Robert Pattinson's Gotham. We will find out. But like I said, the Batman Part 2 has been delayed once again to February 18th, 2028. Looking at some unfortunately sad news, Jurassic Park star Sam Neill passed away this past Monday at the age of 78. We haven't had a chance to talk about this on podcast, but I did post kind of a memorial post on all the socials for him. I guess no word yet on what exactly was the cause. I think his immune system could have been compromised from what I'm reading, that from the chemo, since he was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago. That could have been a issue in there. But Sam Neill leaves behind a very legendary and extraordinary career. You know, Jurassic Park, Event Horizon. He appeared in Thor, like we're going to talk about today, reprising his role as the stage actor playing Anthony Hopkins's Odin, which was really fun to see, and Ragnarok, and now they brought him back for Thor Love and Thunder, like we'll talk about today. But Sam Neill is an incredible actor. I think the first thing I saw him in was Jurassic Park, and then probably the Merlin TV movie that he did, that not a lot of people, I think, remember him doing, but he's really good in there as Merlin, so check that out. But thoughts and prayers, of course, go out to his fans and family as they mourn the loss of Mr. Sam Neill. We got a rumor alert. Adam Driver supposedly has been cast as Magneto, and I don't know how I feel about that. I'm seeing reports also before hopping on the mic today that he could be playing Sinister. So I think in some capacity, Adam Driver's probably going to be cast in the X-Men part of the MCU. He will probably be a villain. Disney seems to enjoy bringing actors from different universes, playing the same typical character. So Adam Driver, previously playing Kylo Ren in the Star Wars franchise, it makes sense for him to be an MCU villain. So I think I'm totally fine with him being Magneto. I still need to kind of think that over a little bit. But until it's officially cast, this is all rumors. Even the other X-Men cast that have been kind of rumored out there throughout the week. It's all hearsay. It's all rumors. It's all leaks, supposedly, from people that work at Marvel. But Adam Driver is the newest rumor and supposedly got cast or in final talks to play Magneto in the MCU's version of the X-Men, which will be, sounds like the next phase once this whole quantum cosmic phase of shows and movies is done. I think they called it the multiverse saga. So once Secret Wars, I think, is the end of it, we'll get the mutant saga, which will kick off the new age of X-Men and other things like that. So Adam Driver is the newest rumor to be cast as Magneto. Like I said, I don't really know what I think about it right now. I think I'm fine with it. I mean, he did a decent job as Kylo in Star Wars. But we'll see if this is true, what he can bring to the table. I mean, Michael Fassbender and Ian McKellen are iconic figures to play the character in previous X-Men stories. So he's got some big shoes to fill if this is true. Reaction today, and then we'll jump into our featured film. I recently saw Evil Dead Burn, finally. The newest chapter in the Evil Dead saga, which I totally forgot was coming out this summer. For some reason, I thought it was coming out in like April or November, around Halloween time. But nope, they threw it right into the summer blockbuster season. And I enjoyed it for what it is. It definitely messes with its own lore as far as like the franchise and that goes. But I still enjoyed it. There's some really different and really entertaining kills, and the way that some of the cinematography with some of the camera angles are really awesome. There's one tracking shot, and I don't want to spoil too much of the movie if you haven't seen it, but there's like a tracking shot where I think her name was Alice, pretty much the main character in this chapter. We're following her with the camera, but in the background, the demon or whatever is beating the shit out of other people. And it was a very John Wick-esque cinematography style where, we're focused on Keanu Reeves or we're focused on one certain part of the frame, and in the background just chaos is unfolding. I thought that was a really interesting technique to use in The Evil Dead, which I think is what they needed to do with this chapter in the saga, is to change it up a little bit to give fans something that we haven't really dived into. Like, they gave us a name to this cult-like organization that is behind all those recordings that we've been hearing in each of the Evil Dead movies, explaining what is going on and what the Book of the Dead is and things like that. And speaking of the Book of the Dead, I thought it was really unfortunate that they didn't even show the Book of the Dead. Like, you would think that they would at least show a shot of it, but it was really just drawings and sketches and a notebook that we saw of it. We didn't actually see the Book of the Dead. And the way that this whole thing kicks off is by the main character, Alice. She's reading the incantation or spell or words or whatever on pieces of paper. It wasn't directly from the book. So it definitely has some issues with its own lore as far as like universe franchise building. But it's still an entertaining chapter in the saga. Looking at the Evil Dead ranking and the popcorn rating for Evil Dead Burn. So I gave it 3 popcorns. Again, like I said, it messes with its own lore, but it's still a very entertaining chapter in the Evil Dead franchise, which I love. It's a franchise that it took me a while to watch. I finally watched all of them this past weekend to prepare for the Evil Dead movie, the newest one. And there's a couple that I hadn't seen yet. Like, I hadn't seen the 2013 Evil Dead, like, at all. I just kind of blacked out or avoided it because the first 2 Evil Deads were so iconic to me. Army of Darkness, I enjoy it for what it is, but it's definitely one of the weaker chapters in Evil Dead because it's just not what I really want out of an Evil Dead movie. Evil Dead Rise, I remember seeing when it first came out and being blown away by it. I actually saw that one in theaters. And that was very, very entertaining. I really liked that one. And looking at the Evil Dead ranking for Evil Dead Burn, I put it at number 5. Just to kind of go through the list here real quick before we get into Thor today. So again, you can rank the Evil Dead franchise on the website using the rankings page on there. So just set up a profile on the website and go in there and rank all sorts of different universes like the MCU, Spider-Man, Evil Dead, like I'm going to do now. So looking at the ranking here, at number 7, so there's 7 projects in here total, including the Ash versus Evil Dead show, which I'm going to include in this universe ranking. So at number 7, I have Army of Darkness. Like I said, I enjoy it for what it is, but it's definitely not what I wanted out of an Evil Dead movie or project. It's a lot of humor in it, a lot of goofy Bruce Campbell, which I love. It's just Army of Darkness just didn't really fit in with the rest of the universe, so I feel like it's just kind of the black sheep of it, but I'd still enjoy it for what it is. Number 6, I put the Evil Dead 2013 version here. It's pretty much a copy and paste of the first movie, and I hate it when they do that, when they try to do this kind of quiet, soft reboot, remake. Really, it's just a gore fest. It's in the kind of tail end of that stretch of horror films where it was just torture porn, gore porn, whatever you want to call it. I talked about this a lot on the Saw episode last year's Fright Nights, where from like early 2000s into the 2010s, there was just this infatuation in Hollywood and certain parts of the horror genre of Hollywood that just wanted to give fans, or audiences I should say, just the goriest scenes possible. Torture porn, basically, like the Saw movies. And that's kind of what this Evil Dead falls into, and that's really all it is. It's copy and paste almost what the first movie is, and it just adds in that early 2010s torture porn in there to try to make it entertaining, and it just wasn't vibing with it. Evil Dead Burn, like I said, comes in at number 5. Like I said, it messes with its own lore, but it is entertaining at some parts of the movie. I enjoyed it. It wasn't a complete waste of time. Ash vs. Evil Dead, I love. So that comes in at number 4. And because of that, it's it just happens to be at number 4. It doesn't mean it's bad or anything. It's just kind of how this list came to be. Number 3 is where I put Evil Dead Rise. I really liked that one. It really blew me away by not just like the horror elements of it, but the cast and the story that they were trying to tell was really good. And it reminded me of those early movies of the Evil Dead, and that's what I want. I want this franchise to feel like it belongs in this franchise and not be like the Army of Darkness a little bit, being that odd black sheep out, you know. Number 2 is where I put the original Evil Dead movie from 1981. Really incredible what Sam Raimi did with that back in 1981. No one had really seen anything like that. You know, of course, that's way before my time. But from what I'm researching and what I've been reading about for people that were there when that movie came out, it was something brand new to the horror franchise, and it just changed everything. And then at number 1 is where I put Evil Dead 2. That is my favorite. I think that is the best one that they've done. It's Bruce Campbell, you know, honing in on the Ash character, who is a big part of this universe. And I think at this point we need Ash back. We need Bruce Campbell back. I know he's gotten a lot older since he's played Ash in Ash vs. Evil Dead, which I think came out in like 2015. So we're looking, you know, 10 plus years since he's played the character. But I think this movie, this franchise needs Ash back in it for it to give that Evil Dead feel to it. And they need to work on not messing with their own lore, their own past as far as storytelling and franchise building. And that's the biggest thing with Evil Dead Burn. But go ahead and check out Evil Dead Burn. It's in theaters now. It's probably going to hit one of the streaming services here in the next couple months. But I did enjoy it for what it is. And I enjoy the Evil Dead franchise. So I will watch any Evil Dead movie that comes out, whether it's good or bad. I'm going to watch it because I do enjoy this franchise. So with that, let's take a quick break. And then we'll dive into our featured film of the day, Thor, Love and Thunder. This episode is brought to you by Dubby Energy. Still drinking energy that quits before you do? Stop crashing, stop shaking, and start performing. Meet Dubby Energy, clean energy made for gamers, creators, and anyone who refuses to slow down. With zero sugar, no jitters, and no crash, Dubby keeps you locked in whether you're grinding ranked, streaming for hours, or pushing through those late nights. There's no crash, no fade, just gas. Drink different, perform better. Grab Dubby Energy and use code Cinematic10 to get 10% off your order today.
I just want to say that was very, very impressive what you did back there.
He's just my first bad guy.
You never forget your first.
Unlike the other gods of kill.
Because I have something worth fighting for.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Like I said, our feature film today is Thor, Love and Thunder, which was released on July 8th, 2022. So we are past now the 4-year anniversary of it. It grossed $760 million at the box office worldwide on a $250 million budget. No surprise there. I mean, with the CGI and everything that they went through to make this movie, that $250 million budget seems to be about average now for a Marvel film with all the vision, CGI techniques that they use, paying the actors. I think Chris Hemsworth got like $20 million for this movie. And that explains the budget for sure. But yeah, I remember seeing this in theaters, actually. It was kind of like towards the end of COVID, where, you know, theaters were starting to open back up. You know, you didn't really need the mask as much. So this was kind of like, okay, movies are coming back, theaters are coming back, and let's kick it off with the Marvel film. Well, Thor, Love and Thunder wasn't really received very well when this movie came out, and I think it still isn't really received very well. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot, actually. You know, rewatching it for today's episode, I'm like, holy crap! I I must have forgot how much I enjoyed this movie because I'm having fun here. Now, of course, there's a lot of issues with this movie, and we'll dive into that, of course. But, on the surface, broad review here, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it is. It was very entertaining. I like Chris Hemsworth. I think this is one of the better performances that he's done as a character. Ragnarok is probably my favorite of his. I think that is probably his best as well. And then you have his performance in Infinity War, which I think is the next best for sure. Endgame, I have, it just depends on what kind of fan you are of Endgame. I wasn't a huge fan of the Fat Thor storyline. I get the comedic bit for it, but I just wasn't fully on board with the Fat Thor version of him. I'm much rather like this version. This is what I think of as Thor, is this godlike figure, this unattainable body that Chris Hemsworth put himself through to achieve. And it's just this version of Thor is what I like better. He's much more, I want to say, wow, I can't really think of putting the word. It's just kind of, Ragnarok was such an anomaly in the Thor franchise and part of the MCU that just kind of blew everybody out of the water. It's just, he had that incredible performance and the way that he was able to mix in the comedy with the seriousness of the role. And this leans a little bit more into the comedy side of it, but not to the point where it's egregious. I think it is a really good performance by Chris Hemsworth. And I think a lot of people just kind of misinterpreted or misunderstood what kind of Thor this movie was. Now, when we get to Gore, the villain, I have a lot to say about that as far as the writing, because I think they casted it perfectly. I think Christian Bale is perfect as Gore. I just think with the writing and everything, they didn't quite tap into his full potential as Gore, and the route they kind of took towards the end wasn't great. Again, like I talked about in the Miss Marvel episode last time on the show, Marvel has a huge third act problem, specifically with their villain and how they kind of wrap that stuff up. And Thor is no excuse to that. The third act kind of drags on. I was a bit bored during the third act. It had a potential to be great with, Thor giving the kids the power of Thor for a limited time only. They're using their whatever toy they had on him to harness the power of Thor, kind of like his hammer, and just kind of defeat Gore's army, which was fun and entertaining and silly, which is great. It's that Taika Waititi silliness that he added into Ragnarok. Just kind of, this is the best way I can probably describe this movie is it's Ragnarok on steroids. It's taking the best parts of Ragnarok, the comedy, the chemistry between the characters, the goofiness, the silliness, and just amplifying it 100 times, which I think is to its detriment to a certain extent. Ragnarok was that perfect blend of seriousness with comedy, something that we didn't really get a whole lot of in the MCU to work out perfectly like it did for Ragnarok. I think Iron Man would probably be the best comparison to it. It has that snarkiness, comedic beat of Tony Stark, but it also has that seriousness to it. A lot of these MCU projects either lean one or the other. It's taking itself too seriously, or it's just overloading it with comedy and things like that, and trying to make fans laugh instead of giving them a true movie-going experience where it's a mixture of seriousness and just kind of messing with your emotions. This, like I said, is just kind of Ragnarok times 100, but it's the wrong parts that are times by 100. Like, I think they should have taken parts of this a little bit more seriously, made the tone a little bit more darker. You can add in the comedic stuff and comedy bits and things like that. You can make Thor say jokes and things like that and play around. But when it comes to the villain and this dark story, I think it needed to kind of rein in the comedy a little bit and bring it back to that level of Ragnarok, and it just unfortunately missed the mark there. But that's just my take on it. I know a lot of people, their issues with it was, the wokeness, the Taika Waititi in general, because a lot of people at the time were just kind of either over him or just didn't think he was a great enough director to do another Thor movie. They just kind of labeled it as, oh, he got lucky with Ragnarok, and he's more of a comedy actor than he is a writer or director. I'm kind of in the middle there. I'm not the biggest Taika fan, director, writer-wise. I think he's a great actor. I think he's got that skill set to be a really good comedy actor. But I think when it comes to his directing and writing style, it doesn't really resonate with me. I don't necessarily like all the choices or decisions that he made. Now, I get it. You got to remember, movies are a director, a writer's vision of what this story is. Take it for what it is. You can either like it or hate it, but don't hate the person. I don't hate Taika, whatever. Seems like a really great guy. It's just some of his creative decisions I don't necessarily agree or work as well as they could have. And I think he probably could have benefited from tweaks in the script, maybe some helps from an outside writer or something like that to kind of just hone in the comedy a little bit and bring it back to that Ragnarok level. So that's just kind of my experience with Thor Love and Thunder and how I feel. We'll dive into specifics more as we go along. But to give you a kind of a brief synopsis of the movie, if you haven't seen Love and Thunder in a while, well, it brings Thor, kind of catching up with him after Endgame. He's teamed up with the Guardians. They've been saving the universe from various different missions. He talks about breaking up with Jane and how that has affected him the last 8 years, which, funny enough, is the last time we actually saw her, Natalie Portman, in a MCU movie was 8 years since this came out in The Dark World, which was really funny, and I can't believe it's been 8 years at the time this came out. It was like, holy crap, it's already been 8 years since Thor, The Dark World, which is crazy to think. So they end up running into Gore, who is trying to kill all the gods as a promise to his daughter, who unfortunately passed away from, I think it's starvation. I would assume they didn't really come out and say, oh, she died because she was hungry. It's just kind of insinuated that the way that scene played out, she died of starvation. So that's just kind of his motivation as a villain in this movie, which I think is a great motivation. What's more motivation do you want than a father avenging the death of his daughter? And that's kind of where this story unfolds, is where, Thor doesn't really have a family, doesn't really have relationships. He, of course, wanted to have a family with Jane. Universe said otherwise. So it's kind of like what could have been. And, of course, at the end, he ends up kind of adopting Gore's daughter when she is brought back to life and Gore passes away. So in that ending, it's kind of weird. I think that could have been probably played out better. This is part of the MCU at the time where they were trying to come up with successors to all the original Avengers. You had Kate Bishop for Hawkeye. You had Spider-Man kind of be the successor to Iron Man in a way. Here you have Gore's daughter, Love, hence the title Love and Thunder, which I think they probably could have picked a different name than naming her Love, which... See, it's really weird, and I just not a really good fan of it. They how a lot of movies is giving you that wink wink moment where they say the title of the movie in the movie. Well, they actually named one of the characters after the title, which doesn't really work all the time, and it definitely doesn't work in here. So I think they could have did a better job with the name. But hey, that's just my gripe with it. It's just an opinion. It's. Some people like it, some people don't. I think they could have done it a lot better. And that whole storyline at the end where it's well, you guys are just setting up the new Avengers to come out. You have Miss Marvel, who probably is going to take over the Captain Marvel role because a lot of people just don't really care for Brie Larson's Captain Marvel, which I'm in the same boat there. But like I said, this is the part of the MCU where they were setting up all these successors, and Love seems to be this newest one that could be taking over the Thor mantle, so to speak. Jane Foster, diagnosed with cancer, so she ends up getting Thor's powers from the broken Mjolnir, who calls to her, reforms, and then she is the mighty Thor, which is an alternate version of Thor in like the multiverse comic book world. Here they kind of blended it together, similar to what they do in the comics. I thought Natalie Portman was great as Jane Foster. I really liked her mighty Thor. I thought it was a really good time to bring in that character. You know, this is the multiverse saga part of the MCU, so you got to bring an alternate version of Thor somehow. And I think the way they did it was actually pretty good. I think the story that they told with her, how they explained, the past 8 years, I think they did a decent job with what they could do. So I liked her part of the story. Her dying makes sense. You know, Natalie Portman has publicly had issues with Marvel since the Dark World movie came out. So this was kind of their way to give Jane Foster the ending that fans could be fine with. You know, she passed away from the cancer. She's in Valhalla. Thor can move on. And we don't have to cast Natalie Portman anymore in a Marvel movie. You don't have that tension between the two. So it makes sense. What they do with the Thor character, I'm not sure what they're going to do, but only time will tell. He'll show up in Doomsday. Will he show up in Secret Wars? Who knows at this point? All we know right now is he will show up in Doomsday. Anything after that, it's all hearsay until we actually see how Doomsday unfolds, unfortunately. But so, Gore kidnaps all the kids of Asgard. He needs the Stormbreaker from Thor in order to open up this interdimensional portal or whatever to bring back his daughter, essentially. But this will unfortunately be his undoing. This is what ends up killing him. He has the necromancer sword, which is a god killer. That's how he's able to kill all these gods. So he has a vendetta against all the gods, and he's going around killing everybody. And he needs the Stormbreaker to bring his daughter back to life. So that's where that comes into play. And Thor gathers up his team of mighty Thor, Jane Foster, Valkyrie, Korg is back. Screaming Goats join in, which I love. I think the Screaming Goats are my favorite part of the movie. Ironically, I think I laughed every time they screamed. There's one part in the movie, and I remember laughing so hard in the theater when this part happened, where they're flying in, they're going to the Shadow World, and they crash into the Shadow World planet, and all you hear is the goats screaming. It sounds stupid, but it's hilarious to me. The Screaming Goat thing got me. It's a really good comedic pick. I loved it every single time. So I've kind of touched up on the cast quite a bit already. Like I said, Thor is back with Chris Hemsworth. I think this is like his 7th or 8th appearance as Thor. So he's been a part of the MCU for quite a bit. Jane Foster as Natalie Portman. King Valkyrie now, played by Tessa Thompson once again. We met her in Ragnarok, and then she showed up in Endgame, of course. But she is King of Asgard. She's overseeing everything. They have all the modern stuff, but also mixing in the old Asgard traditions, which they call New Asgard. She's great. I love her. Korg, like I said, returns, played by, once again, Taika Waititi. And then Gore, played by Christian Bale. Christian Bale had initially turned down the possibility of appearing in any more comic book superhero films after Dark Knight Rises, seeing the genre as uninteresting from an acting perspective, and especially finding the experience of donning the Batman costume to be a miserable one. I mean, wearing that Batman suit for that amount of time that he did, I totally understand why he would be very hesitant or not even wanting to do a comic book movie anymore, because that is a lot on your body. Like, him physically transforming into like the muscular Batman to look like a superhero had to be draining. You know, especially with him, he's one of those method actors where whatever project it is, he'll lose 60 pounds, he'll gain it back. It's just really a big toll on the body. And, you know, after the loss of Heath Ledger and going through the whole Dark Knight phase of his career, had to have been exhausting and kind of like, okay, I did my superhero franchise, I want to move on. But it turns out that he did agree to be a part of the film, having been impressed by Taika Waititi's previous works, and then also his kids talked him into doing the role. So, I mean, if you're going to do anything for your kids, might as well play a villain in a Marvel movie, which is one of the biggest franchises ever in movie history. So now he is a part of Marvel and DC. And why not be one of the big popular Thor villains, and then Batman being one of the most, if not the most popular DC superhero next to Superman. So, I mean, Christian Bale is just on the top of the world when it comes to his career. But so he didn't. Honestly, I can't really think of anybody else that would have played this role as well as he did. I think if they would have cast anybody in there, it probably would have been weaker of a performance, because Christian Bale just brings in that insane, dark vibe to the character. And I think with him doing American Psycho, I think he had to have tapped into that a little bit, because he is completely nuts in this movie. Like, bonkers, to the wall insanity with his mental state and just the way he acts and the creepiness of it. I think he kind of, tapped into his American Psycho phase a little bit to do this role, and I applaud him for that. So I think if anybody else would have been cast in this role, it would have been a weaker performance. I think Christian Bale actually helps this movie. Now, the script part of it, they probably could have changed a bunch of stuff for him to do. But as far as his performance himself, I think he did a great job. Guardians of the Galaxy shows up, like I said, at the beginning of the movie with the team up with Thor at the end of Endgame. You get Chris Pratt back as Star-Lord. Rocket shows up, Groot, Drax, Mantis, Nebula. Of course, Gamora is off on her own. We don't see her. And then Zeus, played by Russell Crowe, who I have a huge problem with. We'll talk about him more in the iconic scenes, because I have that God Council meeting as one of the iconic scenes. But I love Russell Crowe to death. I don't know what fucking movie he thought he was in, but he was in the wrong movie. Like, the way, the accent, the way he went about presenting himself as Zeus. I get it, maybe in Taika Waititi's head, maybe in Russell Crowe's head, they thought this would be a funny bit. I just found it really annoying and just really ridiculous, and it just left a bad taste in my mouth for Zeus as a character. I had a Godfather moment where I looked at it and go, what have they done to my boy? What have they done to Russell Crowe to act like this? And it's total ridiculous. I did not like Russell Crowe in this movie at all. And I shift the blame more towards Taika Waititi and his vision of what Zeus is versus Russell Crowe. I just did not like Zeus whatsoever in this movie. And it's what really holds this movie back, I think, is that ridiculousness of Russell Crowe. You're like, oh, cool. Russell Crowe is Zeus. This is awesome. And then he starts talking. And then he really starts talking. And you're like, oh my God, what have they done to Russell Crowe? Like, it's just so bad. I really do not like it. Directed, of course, by Taika Waititi, who previously did Ragnarok. That's kind of what got him the job. Again, is because Ragnarok was just such a breath of fresh air for the Thor part of the MCU. It's one of the best MCU movies out there. And of course, why not roll it back with Taika? He did a great job with Ragnarok. Maybe continue it with Love and Thunder. Well, when this movie came out, they're like, okay, I think we're done with Taika. He kind of flew too close to the sun on this one. And like I said, I like Taika as an actor. He's funny as an actor. He's got the skill set to be an actor. It's just when it comes to his creative decisions and his ideas and things like that, how he directs and writes, don't agree with all of them. I just don't find them entertaining. I do like some of his other projects, like Jojo Rabbit. I really like. I thought that was a great movie. Now, is Adolf Hitler in that one? A little bit ridiculous. But aside from that, I do like Jojo Rabbit as a movie. It was really, really good. And I love Ragnarok. Ragnarok was great. Like I said, one of the best MCU movies. It's definitely the best Thor movie. And it's unfortunate that he kind of just, like I said, flew close to the sun a little bit. I already mentioned the Screaming Goats. I think they're the highlight, the best part of the film. I laughed every single time that those Screaming Goats came on. It's just great. Love it. We get another useless post-credit scene. Like, I think most of these post-credit scenes in like phases 4, 5, and 6 are just useless. Either Marvel doesn't know what they want to do with it, or they're like, okay, we have an idea at this very moment in time. Let's do this. And then they forget about it. Like, it's just, I don't get it. So we get the Hercules reveal, played by what was it, Goldstein from Ted Lasso. So he's playing Hercules in the MCU. But what the hell are they gonna do with Hercules? Are they gonna save him for Thor 5? Are we ever gonna get a Thor 5? Like, it's just another worthless post-credit scene to get you hyped. Like, oh, cool, they're incorporating Hercules into the MCU to take revenge for Zeus. Here we are 4 years later with not even a single sight of Hercules whatsoever in these projects. So I don't get it. I don't get it. These post-credit scenes are useless. It's just useless. The jealous Stormbreaker comedy bit, I really like this. So Mjolnir, of course, is with Jane Foster. She's the mighty Thor now. And when Thor sees Mjolnir again, he's like starstruck, like, seeing your ex again for the first time since you broke up. And there's some love still there. Well, Stormbreaker, the way it kind of floats around onto the screen is like a jealous current girlfriend. It's stupid. Like, on paper, it sounds stupid, but the way that they executed this on screen, it was actually very entertaining. I really, really like it. That moment where they're going through the Bifrost and he's talking to Stormbreaker and he's like, "Oh, you want you have your first beer? We good? Okay, we're good." He taps him on the hammer part of it. It's hilarious. It's stupid, 100% stupid, but I found it really, really enjoyable. The whole jealous current girlfriend with the ex hammer bit was really, really good. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And then Thor past Avengers Doomsday. Like, what are we going to get with Thor? Is Thor going to die? Is he going to die in Secret Wars? Are we going to get a Thor 5? Are we going to get more team-ups? Like, we got the Hulk team-up in Ragnarok. Who knows what they're going to do with Chris Hemsworth? Does Chris Hemsworth even want to do Thor again? We'll see what the fate of Thor is after Doomsday, after Secret Wars, if he makes it that far. I wouldn't be surprised if they kill off Thor in one of these two Avengers movies. I wouldn't be surprised if they kill him off in Thor 5 if they do decide to do a Thor 5. It's really up in the air what we're going to do with Thor post Doomsday. That's the only one so far that's been confirmed. And maybe they've confirmed a Thor 5 since this recording. So you can forget everything I just said if they did confirm Thor 5 by the end of this recording. But as of right now, Doomsday is really the only thing we know for sure when it comes to the future of Thor. Okay, let's get into the iconic scenes, favorite quotes, and fun facts. Iconic scenes. This was tough. I didn't know exactly what my most iconic scene was. So I got a couple options here to kind of talk through, and then I'll give you what my iconic scene is from Thor: Love and Thunder. So the first one I have here is Thor fighting with the Guardians of the Galaxy on that planet with the hairy furballs shooting guns at them and driving around on speedsters. I really like his costume design in this one with like the red rocker vest and the rocker t-shirt underneath, the blue jeans. He just looks like a heavy metal band guitar player. Really, really like it. Really leaning into the 80s aesthetic of the movie, which was fun. And then you get the Guardians, of course, working with him to defeat the enemy. But what I wanted to bring up, and the scene that I think of the most, the sequence from this scene particularly, is that Van Damme kick is what I call, where he's stopping the two motorbikes with his legs spread out. It was really, really cool. And just Chris Hemsworth's facial reactions doing that was really fun. So that's definitely an iconic scene for me. Gore attacking New Asgard and then kidnapping the kids. This is a very dark and violent sequence. This is where you get to really see the first glimpse of Gore's power as the villain, where he's summoning these shadow monsters and he's able to go toe-to-toe with Thor. We get the introduction to the mighty Thor on Jane being able to wield Mjolnir and it breaking apart into like 10 different pieces and killing 10 enemies was pretty cool. And then, of course, you get Thor in this really shiny blue and gold armor to like compete with mighty Thor, which I thought was fun. But that is a really dark and very kind of violent scene, but it's really cool to get that first glimpse of the mighty Thor, Jane, as Thor. It was really cool. Okay, the God Council meeting. This, of course, is got to be an iconic scene because it's so ridiculous. So Zeus comes in. It's the Council of the Gods. Of all sorts of gods from all over the different religions, different universes, all that stuff. There's so many different gods here. So Zeus comes in, and he's got, the bolt, the lightning bolt, and he's twirling it around and things like that. He's showing off. Then he starts talking about orgies, and this is like, whoa, pump the brakes here. I thought this was a family-friendly kids movie, and you got Russell Crowe talking about orgies in here. Like, it just came out of left field. It just makes no sense, and it's a little too adult, if you ask me, for a Marvel movie. Marvel has, for the longest time, was very afraid of doing, like, R-rated movies until Deadpool and Wolverine comes out. Now they're totally fine with it because they own the Alien franchise, too. But to stick a line like that in, it's just kind of like, whoa, where the hell did that come from? And you got these parents bringing their kids to a Thor movie, like, and they're talking about orgies. Like, come on. You can do better than that. And just the whole, Zeus coming in, just the accent. And I have a fun fact with the accent here, and I'll talk about that. Well, let's just do it now. So it was actually Russell Crowe's idea to have Zeus speak with a Greek accent. Director Taika Waititi wanted a British accent for the Greek god. So he had Crowe do every take once in Greek and once in British. Waititi then determined that Crowe was right and the Greek accent worked best. I couldn't think of anything that could have made this scene worse until I read that. If Russell Crowe came in with a British accent as Zeus, this would have been one of the worst movies in Marvel history. Thank God Russell Crowe convinced Taika to do a Greek accent for a Greek god. Like, what in Taika's mind did he think of having a British accent for a Greek god be a good idea? It's just ridiculous. But the mannerisms of Zeus, he wasn't Zeus. Like, it was just ridiculous. The shit he was saying, the way he acted, the way he talked to Thor, it's just, he sucks. I mean, Thor even says it in the meeting itself, where he's like, oh, hold on, maybe he's getting to his point. Then Zeus says another line, and he's like, yeah, this guy sucks. It's just a really, really bad scene. And that's why it's iconic, because it's terrible. Because of Russell Crowe's performance, it's just really, really bad. Now we have the Shadow World fight with Gore, which it looked weird, but it looked kind of cool at the same time, if that makes any sense. Shadow World, it's dark. It's a lot of white and black coloring. And then you just see the blue lightning coming out of Thor and the yellow lightning from Zeus's bolt that Valkyrie's using. It was very much, you can tell this was filmed on a blue screen, the vision screen. Like, it looked fake. It was a neat idea, fighting Gore in his home world where it's Shadow, he's at his strongest, and he's able to get Stormbreaker. And I think that's just the part of it that I think of as iconic the most is, the blue lightning and the yellow lightning from the bolt going around. It's like a aesthetically, it's really cool. But at the end of the day, when you look at the scene for what it is, it makes no sense. It's just action to have action. It's just a bunch of colorful lightning flying around to please the eyeballs. That's really all it is. And then the final fight with Gore / the kids getting the power of Thor for limited time only, as he says it. Like I said, third act problem with Marvel movie. Obviously, Marvel just can't seem to land the plane with these third acts. But it is a fun little thing to add the kids in there with their whatever toy that they had with them at the time and summoning the power of Thor. And it was fine, but it's iconic because of the kid part, basically. And then, of course, this is where Natalie Portman dies, so it's iconic for sure. But I think the most iconic for me, or the thing that I think of the most when I hear the title Thor, Love and Thunder, it's the God Council meeting because of how ridiculous Zeus is in that scene. It's just, It's really bad, guys. It's really bad. But hey, if I missed any scenes or if you have a different opinion, shout out in the comments on the video what your iconic scene is or what you think about the God Council meeting, because I think it's the worst part of the film. It's iconic for the bad reason, for the worst reasons, honestly, and that's just, yeah. Let me know what you think of the iconic scenes. Favorite quotes? Not too many quotes that I could think that really stood out to me. Thor, you flick too hard, damn it, which was in the trailer. And then I'll call the axe when you call a dentist. That one's pretty funny. Speaking to Gore, of course. And then this one from Gore, it feels more like a promise than a curse. So this is my vow. All gods will die. Another line from the trailer. And then Jane Foster, eat my hammer, where she's trying to come up with the right catchphrase for her Thor. And she comes up with eat my hammer at the end against Gore. My favorite quote is, I think it's you flick too hard, damn it. It was... That scene was, I'll admit, that part of the council meeting was actually pretty funny, where he's chained up with the lightning chains, and Zeus is like, okay, let's flick your clothing away to reveal who you really are. And instead of just like flicking the hood, he flicks the entire clothing off of Hemsworth, and he's just buck-ass naked here in the meeting. I love it how some of the other gods faint because, you know, Hemsworth's body is just a fixture of masculinity and just the perfect body shape. And all the tattoos on his back, like the Loki tat and the Odin tat, was really good. I like that part. But that's probably my favorite quote is, you flick too hard, damn it. Fun facts. I already talked about the Zeus one. And then the other one that I had was Chris Hemsworth on his 8th time playing the character of Thor. Achieved his biggest physique ever for this film, getting up to 231 pounds for the role. This extent of muscle mass required Hemsworth to eat at least 8 times a day during the entire duration of filming, just to maintain all the muscle mass he had acquired. To eat 8 times a day, I can barely eat 3 times a day. His physique in this movie is insane. And he's even gone on record saying that is the biggest that he's ever been. And I don't think he really wants to be. You know, Zac Efron talks about his experience on the Baywatch movie, where that was the best shape of his life. But it was very tolling on his body over time. And I think with Hemsworth, he might experience, you know, a similar thing where going this big that quick, it's not good for the body. And you just can't maintain that. It's so hard on your body to maintain that for a long period of time. But this is the biggest that he's ever been in his acting career. And I hope that he never gets this big again, because I like Hemsworth. I think he's a great guy. And I don't want to see him hurt his body or put his body through this pain, because, like I said, this is very difficult to maintain over time. You know, you've even seen The Rock, Dave Bautista. They've gone on record stating that being that big is not healthy for that long, and you can tell now that they look very different. You know, they've cut back on whatever regimen that they've been doing to get that big, and they've been kind of, you know, shrinking. And I think Hemsworth is going to be in the same boat, where he's going to start shrinking over time because his body just can't maintain that much muscle. And this is ridiculous shape that he got in. This is probably, I think, the best shape someone has been for a role, other than Zac Efron in Baywatch. Like, what Zac Efron did to get that physique was insane, and it's really hard on your body. So, but this is the biggest Hemsworth. This was kind of publicized before the movie even came out that, hey, Hemsworth is in the best shape of his life. He's the biggest that he's ever been. You know, this is the strongest Thor we're ever going to see. And yeah, we did. And this is going to have unfortunate consequences to his body. And it's just ridiculous what he put his body through for this movie. But I applaud him for doing it. You know, committing to a role. He loves the Thor character. It seems to be the character that he likes the most. But that is an insane amount of muscle to put on your body. So yeah, like I said, this movie is good, but it could have been a lot better. And we're going to talk about that during the ranking here coming up. But I like this movie. I forgot how much I enjoyed it for the parts that I do enjoy. Of course, like I said, the Zeus part really holds us back. I think they could have really tweaked the story and some of the stuff that they had Christian Bale do in this movie to make it even better. I think they should have leaned more into the serious and dark part of this movie and kind of left a lot of the other comedic beats out, and bring it back down to that Thor Ragnarok level where it's a good mesh of both. And this is just really lopsided towards the comedy side of it, unfortunately. So with that, let's head over to the rankings to wrap up today's episode. All right, so let me pull up the MCU ranking here on the website. Thor Love and Thunder comes in at number 28 on the MCU ranking list here. Looking what's around it. Werewolf by Night, number 29. Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness at number 30, which we talked about a few episodes ago. Looking right above it, Moon Knight, 27. Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, 26. And then the first Avengers movie at 25. So Thor, like I said, Thor Love and Thunder, it's had potential to be one of the best, easily a top 20 Marvel movie. But the decisions that Taika made to make this movie really comedy-like, I think they should have leaned in more of the seriousness. I think they could have tweaked the script for Christian Bale's gore, because I think he was very underutilized. I think the stuff that they had him doing here was ridiculous, and they didn't really tap into what Bale could have done as his full potential as a villain. He could have been one of the scariest and one of the best villains in this MCU, but they dropped the ball. And I think it comes down to the writing, and I think it comes to the direction that Taika gave Christian Bale. It's unfortunate because this movie could have been so much better. I mean, it's right there. All the pieces were right there. You had a great cast. The story was decent enough. It's just you flooded it with bullshit, and it ultimately brought this movie down. So that's why it's sitting at 28 instead of 21 or 20. Like I said, or even 19. Like, this could have been a top 20 MCU movie, but here it is sitting at 28. And you probably think in your head, oh, it's not such a big distance from 2028. It is, though, in my mind. Like, that's a huge gap in quality that we're missing out. And it's really unfortunate because I want the Thor movie to succeed after the success that Ragnarok had. I was very excited about Thor Love and Thunder. I was like, hell yes, we get to, Taika's back as director. Thor is back. We get to see Jane Foster as the mighty Thor. Like, Christian Bale is a villain. Are you kidding me? And they just dropped the ball. And I think it comes from the direction of Taika, and it comes from the script that was written by Taika. It's really unfortunate because, like I said, all the pieces were there. This could have been an awesome MCU movie, and it just was okay. It was good. It wasn't awesome. It wasn't mind blowing. It wasn't exciting. It was just, it's cool. So, Thor: Love and Thunder sitting at number 28. Again, you can rank the MCU on the website. Just set up a profile and start ranking, everybody. Villain scale. Reminder, this is where we talk about the villain of the movie. We look at the motivation, the costume, and, of course, the performance by the actor. So looking at Gore, the God Butcher, played by Christian Bale. Motivation. Like I said, he's got probably the best motivation that you can think of. His daughter died. He blames the gods. He's going to take revenge for his daughter's death on the gods. Pretty simple. Tale as old as time. Doesn't need to get too complicated. Cool. I like his motivation. You can relate to that. Like, oh, what if my daughter died? I'd be fucking pissed too. I'd want to kill the gods for not protecting or saving my daughter. He has that really good speech when he meets the gods for the first time. He's like, what about the people down there? They worship you. You're their life. And you're just sitting here on your ivory tower laughing and not taking this seriously. Like, my daughter died believing in you, and you're not going to do anything about it. And that's when the necromancer sword takes advantage of his emotion, and he just kills the gods right there out of spite, out of revenge. It's a really good motivator, and I like that part of the character. It was really well done. Well performed by Christian Bale. Costume's whatever it is. He's just wearing a white cloak. He's got the dark fingers and the veins popping out of his head and the yellow eyes, and he looks creepy and disgusting, and like Thor said, he needs a dentist. But it's nothing mind-blowing. It's just it's a creepy white dude in a white dress, I guess. And then the performance. I like Christian Bale's performance. I think he did the best that he could do with the script that was given to him. He leaned into the creepy, insane side of Gore, which I like, because that necromancer sword had to have fucked with his brain, had to have fucked with his mindset to the point that he was ready to just annihilate the world because he just got insane out of, a promise to his daughter that he was going to avenge her. And I really, really like his performance. I thought Christian Bale did great with what he was given. Now, what he was given could have been done a lot better as far as the script and certain scenes, but I think he did a good job. But with all that said, I landed on 3 Thanos heads for him. I wanted to get to 4, but I just couldn't quite do it. It doesn't resonate with me as one of the great villains in the MCU. It's a good performance by Bale with what he was given, and I just think this villain is not at the height that it could have been. This, like I said, this could have been one of the best villains, and they dropped the ball on it for sure. They had one of the best actors in Hollywood right now playing him. You could see the effort that Bale was trying to give. It's just not a whole lot to work with, and they dropped the ball on it for sure. So 3 Thanos heads for Gore, the God Butcher. Then the popcorn rating. I'm going to give 4 popcorns. I really, really wanted to give this 5, but I just couldn't quite get there. Like I said, the third act just becomes boring, and it falls off just like every other Marvel project. Like I said, they dropped the ball with taking advantage of Bale's great acting chops and not creating one of the best villains in the MCU. Like I said, the Zeus scene is just ridiculous to the point that it's very cringy, very annoying, and just too much comedy mixed in here. They needed to find that right blend of seriousness and comedy that Ragnarok had, and it's just missing it. Thor Ragnarok will probably be the peak of Thor in the MCU for the end of time, and I feel like Thor Love and Thunder could have been on that same level, or at least closer to that level, but unfortunately, like I said, I think Taika dropped the ball. I think Marvel dropped the ball, and they missed out on a really, really awesome Thor movie. So I'm giving it 4 popcorns, which is good, but it's not awesome. It's not mind-blowing. It's good. So I'm giving it 4 popcorns for the parts that I do really enjoy, like Chris Hemsworth's performance, Bale's effort as the villain. I love introducing the mighty Thor. I like the music choices. I love tying in the Guardians of the Galaxy, getting that catch-up moment from Endgame. There's parts in there the Screaming Goats, love it. I love the jealous axe bit with Stormbreaker and Mjolnir. I thought that was great. So 4 popcorns for Thor Love and Thunder. Well, that's going to do it for today's Marvel episode. Next time, looks like we're going to She-Hulk. So we're going to jump back into the Disney Plus shows, and we're going to talk about She-Hulk on our next Marvel episode. We'll continue the Spider-Man marathon with Spider-Man 2. That episode will be dropping here shortly. And then, like I said, I'll be doing an episode on the new movie fantasy game that's on the website to kind of walk you through it, show you how it works, and just have a little fun on the show. So keep an eye out for that one as well. We have the Odyssey coming out this weekend. We're going to do a review episode on that, of course. We're going to dedicate an entire episode to Christopher Nolan, his career, and then, of course, my reaction to the Odyssey movie. So that's going to be fun. Can't wait to see it. So go ahead, check out the Odyssey starring Matt Damon, directed by Christopher Nolan this weekend. It's going to be one of the year's biggest movies. So go ahead and check that out and look for the review episode on Cinematic Reviews. So with that, have a good weekend, everybody, and we'll see you all next time on the show.